Welcome to Red, White, and Blue. From the right, I'm Gary Polland.
And from the left, I'm David Jones.
Tonight we welcome two guests, Mike Malaise, Democratic Party strategist for the 2010 election, and Sue Walden, who is a longtime Republican Party political strategist.
Thank you.
Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Glad
much.
to be here.
And including 2010, I hope, Ms. Walden.
And beyond.
And beyond.
Yes.
So, you've been an observer of Harris County's political fights for a good while.
Mm-hmm.
What do the Republicans have to do to carry the county in November, do you think? Top to bottom, of course.
Well, I think grassroots operations are always critical, and they've got a good plan in place from what I understand. But basically just do what they do because Washington's helping them, and I think we're going to have a real good year across the ticket, statewide and local.
So Gary will tell you there is this enthusiasm gap where, you know, Obama, the president, seems to be motivating voters. The Democrats have to either rebut that,
well, he's motivating,
or you have to exploit it.
He's motivating voters so much that Bill White would not appear with him in Texas last week, which I think is pretty telling.
So what do you have to do, Mr. Malaise, to straighten this out?
Well, I think a lot of that, as far as the enthusiasm gap Mr. Polland talks about, here is mitigated a bit because this is Bill White's home county. The man routinely has 70% and above approval ratings for his job as mayor. He successfully led us through 2 hurricane evacuations. Voters here know Bill White. They like Bill White. In a lot of ways, Bill White is a much stronger top of the ticket than Barack Obama was for this county. And I think that localizing that election and making it a referendum between Bill White and Rick Perry is very positive for Democrats here in Harris County.
Of course, Mike, the big question, you know, talking about the White-Perry race is not Obama's motivation, because Obama was able clearly to motivate African-American turnout to historic highs. Bill White's not going to do that well with African Americans. They're just not going to turn out and vote.
There's a lot of groups that Bill White will do much better than Barack Obama did with. But Barack Obama got 52% of the vote. There's no way that Bill White doesn't get more than 52% of the vote here in Harris County. And there are going to be a lot of groups, for example, you know, in outlying areas in Pasadena and some of these other areas, Kingwood, where Bill White was mayor. They vote in those mayor elections. They voted for him several times. And I just think that there's going to be a lot of groups, as I said, that he does better than Barack Obama did with it here in this county.
But
and I believe his overall numbers going to be better.
Don't you think that Bill White's 4 years too late, that the bloom is off the rose, that 4 years ago Bill White had walked on water, had nobody to criticize about anything, and now we start finding out about borrowed money to pay off pensions, spending the money to repair the water system, and now forced an East Parker to raise water rates.
Well, Gary, I would say
one thing after another that is now being discovered that the Bill White miracle really was smoke and mirrors.
Well, I would say that I know you to be very talented because I've watched the show, and you would have found something to say about Bill White no matter what, if the halo was there or not. Republicans were always going to come after him, and he just needs to have a tough campaign and be able to react to these things. There was never going to be a race where he ran against a Republican where they were like, you know what, you're right, he was a good mayor. That was never going to happen. He has to get out there and prove it, and he has to remind people of the things that he did. You know, look at education, how Rick Perry has let education slide here in Texas. That's not a debate. We've slidden. We've lost ground when you compare us to the other states in the nation. Bill White took the reins in his hands outside of his government duties. He and his wife began a program here that returned almost, I don't want to overstate it and get called on it, but they returned almost 9,000 dropouts back to school. He'll have a results-driven education program versus the ideological-driven education program that we've seen from Republicans here that focuses on things like rewriting the history books to get rid of Thomas Jefferson and Hispanic leaders.
But Sue, stay with Gary's question a second. Isn't Mr. Malaise correct that the people, voters of Texarkana, could care less about the water rates in Houston, Texas?
Well, Houston, Texas is a big voter block, and I think voters across the state, including Texarkana, do care because it shows his management ability and how he left the city with quite a bit of a financial debt. But go back to Perry. Perry, our state is doing so well because of the leadership, not just with Rick Perry, but David Dewhurst and Greg Abbott. We have no taxes, low regulation. We've had tort reform. Businesses want to locate here. We have more Fortune 500 companies based in Texas than any other state, and there's a reason for it. And it's the Republican leadership we have that affects all parts of our lives, be it education, quality of life issues, taxes.
Gosh, I didn't know that politicians were running the economy, Gary.
Well,
is that
yeah,
true?
well, you know,
Is that
it's the rules that they in place absolutely do have an
it's
impact.
fair to say, David, when the economy goes bad, the politicians get blamed. When the economy gets good, they get credit. So Obama's getting blamed now because the economy's tanking. If the economy recovers, Obama will get credit. But Sue makes a good point, Mike.
She does, and
the
I'd like to
economy is
respond to
doing
that.
well, is better in Texas. We went into the recession later than anyone else. We're coming out sooner than anyone else. So does Rick Perry get credit? Any credit for that?
Well, he gets credit for the $18 billion hole that he's built for Texas. You know, if he's doing so great in the economy, you know, we have you want to talk about, as David said here, you know, the Texarkanans don't care about the water rates in Houston, but everybody in the state cares about that $18 billion hole that we've been put into and how they're going to fix it. And, for example, you know, the Republican chair of the Public Education Committee just recently raised the possibility of increasing class sizes to fix the budget. Why would we be doing things like that instead of taking on the special interests and the lobbyists who come through and fleece the state? I think what it comes down to is the priorities and who's going to set those priorities. As far as, you know, Bill White's leadership here in Harris County, I think that his leadership has been admirable, and everybody here recognizes that. I don't think, you know, a few things that the Republicans can pull out here and there and try to attack him on are going to damage him here that much.
Well, here's what concerns me about, and Sue, please join in on this, about the Bill White strategy. I mean, this is not going to be the Democratic position, nevertheless, but I see a lot of time being spent in Corsicana and Midland and College Station, West Texas, by Bill White. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, how do you get elected whenever you're trying to carry medium-sized cities when the Democratic vote is elsewhere? I mean, you know, are you happy with the strategy? Or well, you got to be happy with the strategy.
You know, I've never talked to anyone in the Bill White campaign about their strategy, but to answer what you're saying, he certainly has to travel around the state. He's not a known commodity. A lot of cities in the state, Dallas for one, are in competition with Houston, so they're not necessarily going to fall on the sword for a Houston mayor. And he's unknown, so he's got to court Democrats and independents. And I think his strategy is to pull in some of those other groups to be on his side in order to make up the deficit for the Republican lead. John McCain won the state with 55% of the vote. We're still a Republican state. And Perry has done a good job. The economy's strong.
You see my point, Mike? I mean, you know...
I do, and I'm actually very encouraged that he's going out to those other areas, because it would have been easy for Bill White to sit here in Houston and say, look at the things I've done in Houston. You know, you bring up jobs in the economy. As mayor, Bill White attracted more jobs to this area than 37 states combined. He's done a good job. He has a record, and it would be easy for him to sit here and say, look at me, I'm the mayor of this big city. And I did a great job, and, you know, I had high approval ratings. He's not doing that. He's not taking it for granted, and he's not letting the Republic, he's not just ceding areas out that aren't in the urban areas to Republicans. For example, he's got the Farm Bureau endorsement. He's not leaving anything on the table, and he's not just giving things to the Republicans just because they've always gotten them historically. He's fighting them on every front, and I like that.
Okay, Mike, but I wanted to ask you this. Running from Barack Obama, good idea or bad idea?
I think I wouldn't call it running from Barack Obama. What I would say is that Bill White wisely, his campaign, and again, I'm not advising Bill White, so I don't have any stake in this.
Unless he watches the show this week.
Right.
Gets to see
but
it.
Anybody who knows Bill White knows that he doesn't need my advice.
And he'll let you know.
But you know, I wouldn't call it running. I think he needs to make this a race about Texas, not about the United States. He needs to localize this. He needs to focus on the differences between him and Rick Perry, not the differences between the national parties.
Well, localizing is what happened in 2008 to some extent, and you were involved in that campaign where the Democrats dramatized courthouse failures. Tommy Thomas, the DA.
That's a nice way of putting it. I appreciate that.
Yes, and congratulations. So the question is, and it helped no doubt with some elements of the community's turnout. So where are those issues now? Have you lost those?
I don't believe so. I mean, you have two sitting Republicans who are under investigation by the Justice Department as we speak. Commissioner Eversole and Dwayne Bohack is being investigated by the Justice Department. I'm sorry about that. I know he's one of your clients. But for his business that he was running with Ed Johnson, who was in the tax assessor's office at the time. Now, I don't know what ends up coming of any of those things, but they're still out
like
there.
The delay deal, 6 years later, and it all just kind of peters out. Look, there is nothing there. They've been talking about Jerry Eversole. Jerry Eversole. They've been talking about Jerry Eversole and the investigation.
For a decade.
It's been going on forever. If there's anything there, I would think we've already heard something.
But Mr. Eversole seems to be worried, and the reason in the newspaper the other day he was cussing in front of Boy Scouts.
That's true.
That's a different issue.
And let me tell you,
he has a lot of stress. His wife's been ill, and
And I would say this: if the Democrats thought he was so bad, why don't they run a mainstream Democrat candidate against him and beat him, as opposed to letting Dave Wilson, who is I don't know what independent conservative, run?
I don't think I was making a judgment on whether he's good or bad. I think I was saying that he's still under investigation by the Justice Department, and he is. And unfortunately, for Mr. Eversole. They've been looking into this a long time, and they haven't found anything yet. That's not how the court system works here. He's going to have to go through until they dismiss it or they don't.
Other than those two matters,
he's not been indicted. So
he's not been indicted, but he did himself say
that
he did himself say that he expected to be indicted.
So the attack. Let me see if I understand this. So the attack against Republican down ballot candidates who have nothing to do with Jerry Eversole is. You're tainted because Jerry Eversole is being investigated, even though we didn't run anybody against him.
No, but the question I was asked was whether or not we'd lost those ethics issues. And I'd say I don't believe that we have, because there are still these issues that are out there. The whole thing, and I don't want to get too technical into this because, it's a short show, and unless you've really been following this stuff, you're not going to know. But the whole thing that Dwayne Bohack's being looked into for his connection with the Ed Johnson issue, working in the tax office where he was overseeing provisional ballots at the same time he was consulting through Bohack's company several clients on the Republican ticket whose names were on those ballots, including the local district attorney. These things, maybe they're illegal, maybe they're not, but they certainly raise a red flag. And I think that under one-party rule, and I think this, I'll throw a little olive branch out here. I think anytime you have one-party rule from one party to the other, people get complacent, they get arrogant, and they start doing things, and they figure this is just the way we've always done it. And they don't pay attention to the rules like they should. And I think that's what happened with the Republican Party, and I think there's still some residual effect to that.
Yeah, but isn't the accusation against Bohack, I guess, is that he was selling lists, voter lists, that are available from the county, anyone can buy and put in their program and play with, and that's what he was doing, and that is somehow a scandal?
No, that's not the actual accusation. One, he was pulling. Some people say, I don't want to say he was, because he hasn't been indicted, as you point out, or he hasn't even, they're still looking into that, but they were getting people's personal information. He says he never sold it, but on his website it said that he did. He was offering it for sale, offering people's personal data for sale. He was also
there are a lot of list brokers in the state that sell people's name, address, and phone number, and precinct.
But they aren't using taxpayer funds to do it.
Can I transition out of this? Because believe me, I don't believe anyone is going to see an ad where Dwayne Bohack's name is in it, because people will say, who's he? And why
a great state rep.
He may or may not be. I'm just saying that the question that Gary has put to both of you is that Bill White has to get a strong African-American turnout. And with no top-of-the-ticket leader who is African-American running for lieutenant governor, attorney general, or otherwise, it seems to me that the criminal justice performance at the courthouse, which has negatively impacted black people, is something that the Democrats have to use. Otherwise, they don't get the turnout.
Well, certainly he'll run strong in Houston, but I've been hearing more and more from friends of mine in the African-American community that they're not happy with Bill White and feel that he's neglected them while he was in office. I don't know the detail there, but I've been getting different blogs sent to me and emails, things going out complaining about him, and that was surprising to me. But he certainly will run strong in the city, but Rick Perry is a relentless, awesome campaigner. And no one can out-campaign this man. And he will bring up everything he can on Bill White to show his record, show where he's made faults, problems, and I think the voters here will take a second look.
Yeah, and Sue has a front row seat to that, because Sue was one of the key players for Kay Hutchison, who, by the way, Mike, had the endorsement of the Farm Bureau, and it didn't do her any good. I'm sorry to tell you, it did no good.
But I was saying that Bill White is going for non-traditional supporters in his race, and that's smart to do. You can't just sit around and be like, well, those guys are D's and these guys are R's, and I'm never going to talk to those guys.
I'm going to tell you how it is, okay? He's 4 years too late. He will not win the governorship this year because the tides are against him.
Let me tell you, I have worked on a lot of campaigns. I've worked on a presidential campaign. I have never been more confident in a campaign than I am in Bill White's right now.
We'll agree to disagree.
We'll come back later and you can gloat over me.
Do you not agree with me?
I never gloat.
Do you not agree? I mean, do you agree or not that the criminal justice performance of the Harris County, with Harris County judges, is an issue that resonates with black voters? And if so, how do you get the message out? That Democratic justice will be different.
I think it is an issue. Take, for example, the woman who was thrown in jail for saying thank you, Jesus, after her husband was acquitted. That is ludicrous. That is absurd. And, just that kind of abuse, I think some people get judgeships and they start to think that it's their little fiefdom and they can do whatever they want. The other person the other judge who demanded that this woman, with no authority to do so, I know it was a man, I'm sorry, go to ESL classes to learn English. They don't have authority to do that. They're just making up rules as they go along in the court. But I think the judicial system, yes, but I also think some of the good things the Democrats have done. As Sheriff Garcia took office, he has reformed the prison system and
he's going to sleep here.
You can tell that he's made a big difference. I actually, Sheriff Garcia, nice fella. Yeah. I don't think he had any clue what job he was getting. I think he wanted to be the police chief of the county. He didn't want to be the chief jailer. So his answer to the problems of the county jail is not figuring out ways to reduce jail overcrowding, but to build new jails. Cost the taxpayers more money. That's the Democratic answer. Unfortunately, it seems like all the time, but the commissioners in their wisdom said no.
I would have to definitely disagree with that.
And to criticize, you can certainly find, and we can start looking at the new Democratic judges who have messed up. We have a Democratic judge who declared the death penalty unconstitutional. Last time I checked, trial judges are not supposed to be declaring laws unconstitutional. That's the job of the Court of Appeals. It's a little different than
throwing somebody in jail for saying, thank you, Jesus, when their husband's acquitted. It's a little different.
So you find that more offensive to you than a
I think
Democratic
when
judge
you
striking
stick somebody
down the death
behind
penalty.
bars, when you stick some person behind bars for saying thank you, Jesus.
Okay.
Don't
vote for that person.
Yeah, what are the issues? You guys can tell us, what are the issues driving voters this time? Is it immigration? Is it just Obama? Is it debt? Is it fairness? What?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what's motivating voters, but I do know that voters are very unhappy with Washington, and we're seeing that at the state level. We've seen it in state races across the country. They're very disappointed in governments. I think 76% of the country think that we're going in the wrong direction. So something's got to change, and I think they'll take their frustration out at the ballot box. Now, I think Republicans do have to be a little nervous because we lost some seats last election, some countywide seats, but I think it'll be such a good year for Republicans that will help overcome that.
Have any idea what's going to get voters in hers or yours to the polls?
Well, look, I don't think it's necessarily, I agree with Sue that they're upset with Washington. I think they're also upset with incumbents in general. They don't think that their needs are being served, and I think that extends to Rick Perry here in Texas. I don't think, look, that guy, you can say, well, he's ahead or behind in the polls, but one thing that's consistent, he never reaches 50% in the polls, and it's not like he's a new candidate that they don't know. He's the longest-serving governor in Texas history. They know him. They're not comfortable with him. And as far as what'll drive people to the polls, I think that's a big job that Bill White has to do. He has to get out there. It's not enough just to say, well, people don't like Rick Perry, he's not a good governor, because Sue's right. He's a hard campaigner, and he will fight to the very end. So I think it is good that earlier you mentioned that Bill White's going out to these other outlying areas that Democrats traditionally don't campaign in. I think that's a big responsibility that he has to get out there and push voters to the polls, and he has to look under every rock because Sue is correct that Rick Perry's going to fight to, and he may fight after Election Day.
So, Mike, if the Democrats think that it was an anti-incumbency year in Texas, why is it that every major Republican congressman in the state doesn't have a serious Democratic opponent or no opponent, just like Congressman Poe, who was with us?
Well, I think you already know what my answer would that to be. Those districts are drawn in a certain way in a mid-decade redistricting that did not leave us with competitive seats. As you know, there are very few Democrat competitive seats in this state because of how that was done.
What are the chances that the Democrats will do just well enough to win enough House seats in Texas to regain the majority position in the state House of Representatives? Anybody have a view about whether that's going to be competitive?
I don't think that'll be competitive. I think the Republicans will maintain control, and I don't see that as a an issue.
Is the state party?
I think it's already competitive. And, 2 of those seats here are in Harris County. I think the Ken Legler seat down in the Pasadena area is very competitive. He won by 900 votes. We have a strong candidate down there. Adrian Garcia won that district. There's an increasing Hispanic population down there, and we have a Hispanic candidate down there who's doing a good job. I think Dwayne Bohack could have a race on his hands as well. Kendra Camarena is one of the top fundraising challengers in the state right now for the Democratic Party. So he's not going to have a cakewalk through there, and she's put together a good race.
But by the same token, there are vulnerable Democrats in Harris County, too. Mike Murphy running against the incumbent
That's
Democrat who
won
a narrow race. Probably switches to the Republicans this time. In fact, my prediction is Republicans are they're going to pick up seats in the State House this time, not lose seats because of the strong national currents and the fact that the Texas economy is doing better overall than.
Well, I think Christie holds that seat, and I would Christie Tebow holds that seat over Murphy, and I would kind of liken it to what Sue was saying about Rick Perry. Christie works hard. She's in that district every day. She's going house to house. She looks under every rock. There's no way she's going to be outworked in that district, and I think that she's going to hold that seat.
Are the Democrats depending solely, Sue Walden, on Bill White? Because it seems to me that after the drop-off in terms of significant candidates, well-funded candidates, well-known candidates, is huge after that, whether it be, and Mike can correct my Democratic leanings if he chooses, but, AG, Lieutenant Governor, I mean, there's just not a lot of weight there to the candidacies on the Democratic side.
I would expect that they would hope that Bill White could help pull them in with the money that he'll be spending in Houston to get the vote out here. We have a huge number of votes.
Will Bill White outspend Rick Perry?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. I think they'll both spend so much money that...
I don't know that either.
Yeah, Rick Perry's a great fundraiser. Bill White's done a good job. He's got a tremendous amount of money from trial lawyers, which is his special interest group, which will certainly have a different effect on our state if Bill White were to be elected, which I don't think will happen.
How about all the Hutchinson Republicans, the Kay Bailey Hutchinson friends and Republicans in this city and county who, it's rumored, are very happy with Bill White and supported him for mayor?
I have very few friends that turned over to Bill White. I've read that a lot are coming over, but I just haven't seen it on any kind of grand scale.
Sue would know because she knows where all the money went.
That's right. They're just writing checks, Mike.
Yeah, but there are a few big contributors, and some from those little outlying areas that you were talking about who came over to White. Some very wealthy contributors that have been donating to his campaign who were with Hutchinson, and now they're not. I forget the one man's name out, and I believe it's Lubbock, who came over to Bill White. And I think at the end of the day, you got to remember, Bill White doesn't need an overwhelming number of Hutchinson voters. He just needs a sliver of Hutchinson voters. So it's not like he needs to carry everybody who voted for Hutchinson. He just needs a little portion of them to put him over the top. And I think there are a lot of Kay Bailey Hutchinson voters who don't think it's cute when Rick Perry says we need to secede from the Union or suggests that. And I don't think they're okay with the State Board of Education rewriting the textbooks and what they've done there, because they were moderate, fiscally conservative Republicans, particularly here in Houston, who have looked at Bill White and know that he's a pro-business approach to government, and they're going to be okay with him. And again, he doesn't, we keep talking, everybody keeps talking like he needs a bunch of Hutchinson voters. He needs a few Hutchinson voters.
Of course, Bill White also now has come out and said he would be okay with cities or counties having a gas tax and being able to increase and raise that, which of course is a tax increase. So he'll have to deal with that. But the way the race shapes up, in my mind, is the national currents are so strong that he's basically swimming against the tide. And the tide is Republican. I think the die is already cast nationally. Unemployment is not going to get better, and I think that the fact that the economy nationally, fair or not, is perceived as in the tank, kills the Democrats, since the Democrats have every lever of power in Washington. Washington obviously gets a lot more publicity than Austin does, and I think that's where people's focus is, and that's why the enthusiasm gap, which, by the way, is in Texas, just like it is anywhere else, clearly indicates that conservatives and Republicans are going to turn out and vote. May not think Rick Perry is the perfect candidate for governor, but they'll say he's better than having an Obama Democrat in the governorship. That's how it's all going to come down for them, and that's why, end of the day, Bill White loses. Sue?
I agree.
That was easy.
He forgot to say that he knows how to shoot dogs. So
Yes.
Right. With
running.
laser guided, with laser scopes on.
Yeah.
Well, that does help.
Second Amendment guy,
And Mike, and I guess the question for you
No
is,
self-respected dog shooter would use a laser.
If
If
Perry wins Harris County, however narrow that might be, then that probably spells doom for the countywide ticket.
I don't think
Democrats. Does it
I
not?
will sprout wings and fly before Rick Perry wins this county. He is not going to win this county. It's just not going to happen. Look, you can pull out all the little attacks that the Republicans have tried against Bill White, and they're really sticking it to him with these water rates. No, they're not. People here love Bill White. They saw how he reacted during the hurricanes, how he took leadership role.
I remember the Rita evacuation. It was a nightmare.
Yes, and we will remember.
I wouldn't tout the Rita evacuation. That didn't need to happen.
Of all the public officials who were involved in that, there's just no argument that he came out looking the strongest and looking like the best leader out of all of them.
And let's all hope that there's not another hurricane. There is still some time, however, for everybody to be engaged in relief efforts.
And let me point out,
thank you, Sue.
Which is another reason we're going to do well.
You have had the last word, Mr. Malaise.
Okay.
Well, no, hurricane.
And we thank you, Sue Walden, for being here. A spirited discussion. We invite you to visit our home online at HoustonPBS.org. Click on the local programming site, Red, White, and Blue. Read about the guests, watch the shows, along with our follow-up discussion. Until next time, get informed and get active.